Welcome to Breathe In, Scream Out, a podcast for feeling it all, one breath and scream at a time. I'm Katie Healy, your guide through this sacred mess called life. Here in this podcast, we'll feel everything. We'll cry, we'll laugh, we'll scream, and maybe scream again. Let's get into it. Hello, welcome back to Breathe In, Scream Out. I'm your host, Katie Healy. Thank you so much for tuning in to this special guest episode today. I am interviewing Lynn Mull. Lynn is a healer, a coach, a writer, and a spiritual advisor. She's also the creator of the 24 Oracle deck. It's an Oracle deck infused with Reiki energy to help you gain clarity and closeness to all three of your energy centers, mind, body, and spirit. She's a Reiki master who transitioned from Wall Street to wellness. And I said this on the episode, but Lynn is my favorite type of healer, practitioner, person in the wellness world because she has such a full, rich life full of so much wisdom that's not from the wellness space. She lived a full life, had a full career in something vastly different, and she recognized in herself and various things that unfolded in her life her desire to be more aligned with her purpose, to explore, to get curious, and to live a life that felt more rooted and close to who she was as a person, but still taking all of that knowledge, all of that experience, all of that wisdom, using it now through her new lens in the wellness space as a coach, an advisor, a Reiki practitioner and master, marrying those two things together and helping people, especially women, come into the same alignment in their life. And I get goosebumps even saying that because so many women, and we talk about this a lot on the episode, we hold ourselves back, myself included, from our unapologeticness and our right to live the life that we want, that we desire. And Lynn talks about this and shares her wisdom and knowledge so beautifully. Before we get into the episode, we'll start the way we always do, with a scream, a sigh, whatever it is you need today. So come to a space, private if you can, wherever you are, seated, standing, and if you're going about your life, car, walking, maybe listening at work, I won't tell. In fact, I encourage that actually, to listen on the job. And just find yourself wherever you are. If you're seated or able to find a private moment, just close your eyes, hold them open with a soft gaze, whatever feels best and right for you. We'll take some breaths together. I'll guide us through, but feel free to take all the time you need. Take a deep breath in through your nose. Big sigh out through your mouth. Another deep inhale through your nose. Big sigh out through your mouth. Just letting all that energy, stress, anxiety drop off or melt away. In this final round of breath together, we'll have a little bit of space to make some sound if you can. If you can't, even just miming it feels good. Take your deepest breath in yet. Scream a sigh out into your space, your hands, whatever space you've got. Maybe a little shake, a flutter of the lips. Letting any energy that you're carrying that's not yours, anything you're clinging or holding on to, just drop off with your breath. Finding your seat, your feet beneath you. If your eyes are closed, just beginning to flutter them open. Come back into the space. And I'm so excited to share this episode with you. Please enjoy, get all the wisdom you can from this conversation with Lynn. Hi, Lynn. Welcome to Breathe In, Scream Out. I'm so happy to have you here.
Hi, Katie. This is long overdue. I'm so excited.
Me too. And we start with the same question for every guest. And the question is, what are you screaming about?
I am screaming about women asking for help unapologetically. I think we need to have no guilt around asking for help. That could be a one-on-one with someone like you or me. That could be going to a class. That could be getting a massage, going to a therapist, getting a babysitter, asking for help at work. We need to speak up for ourselves and also figure out what we need most help with. But I think we need to do that unapologetically. And I like to do one-on-one work, so that's where I would tap in or recommend. But just have to do it, ladies. We just have to ask for help.
I love that. I just was recording my Aries season episode, and it was all about that imposter syndrome. Like, we can't have the thing, do the thing, all the ways we justify not taking the action. And also, I sometimes think asking for help is one of the hardest actions. Appearing vulnerable in any way for women, I think, can be really, really challenging. Sometimes more than we understand or realize.
I agree. I used to talk about it in corporate, like you come to work with a backpack on and it can have rocks, it could have sand, it could be open air, but we all come with something in that backpack every day. And at some point it just gets too heavy. You have to unload. And I have a friend who is in a very busy season of her life, 3 boys. And she's like, I'm going to pay for a laundry service. That's her help. For me, that is working with a healer. That is what makes me release stuck energy. So I think it's different for everyone, but there are times when we can just throw our hands up and say, I need some assistance here.
I totally agree. And I would guess that you didn't always feel that way or didn't always operate from this place. And you're a writer, a healer, a coach, a spiritual advisor. But I'd love to hear a little bit just kind of how you got here in terms of even having this revelation of asking for help unapologetically, and where you started and how you ended up doing what you do now.
The journey from Wall Street to wellness was a long one, and I might still have a couple of scars, battle wounds, but that's okay. It tells the story. I just wrote something on my Substack, so if you're listening, check it out, but it's called The Competent Women's Tax. So the way this looked for me was someone told me long ago, and I wrote about this recently, so it's fresh, that don't ever get coffee. Don't be the coffee girl. Don't ever offer to get coffee at the office. It's just so demeaning. Don't do that to yourself. You show up, but you know what I ended up doing? Ordering the lunch, signing up to lead everything, including my own work, and then some. I would take on. So it wasn't coffee, but it was organizing, the team building. The list went on and on and on. Anytime we traveled, who was doing hotel reservations or who was doing, team meals, it was me. So it was all this extra. And at some point I looked up and I'm like, no one else is leading the women's network and leading a book club. And like, you're running in circles. You're like, oh, wait, I also have to do my day job. And I was very, very lucky. I had amazing mentors. I had amazing projects that would be, and probably are, what I worked on in 2007 was written about in books. I was in rooms that were written about in the Wall Street Journal and the New York Times. So I had a really good, robust career and rose to the top. And then at some point, enough milestones occurred in my life. My mom was diagnosed with stage 3 colon cancer. I was engaged, then married, then 2 kids, all while she was still struggling. She's alive today. And then my boss was murdered while I was on my second maternity leave. And people just went about their business very quickly after that happened. Now, the group that worked for her didn't. We still talk and communicate, but the rest of the company literally scattered. Like, people just scattered. We all got broken up into different orgs. We were no longer even a team. They shut her door. And I finally looked at my husband and I said, this place is going to kill me. But I didn't know how to help myself. To your point, I did yoga because I lived in California. Yoga was such a big part. I've always worked out as a college athlete. I've always believed in movement. Visualization, I didn't know was a thing. I was doing it anyway as an athlete. I would do it before I presented on stages in corporate, but I knew there had to be another way. And I worked and just followed the breadcrumbs, Reiki training, coaching training, and I'm a lifelong learner like you. So I just kept following what interests me, which led me to believing that we can heal ourselves if we listen to ourselves, if we get help, and if we make time to hear ourselves think. The answers are really within. I said a lot of cliches there, but I really do believe the answers are within.
Well, most cliches have truth to them, so that's why they exist. But thank you for sharing all that. And I think, personally, your journey to what you do now as a Reiki healer, intuitive coach, speaker, you're definitely one of my favorite types of people in the wellness space, because you actually lived a life that we're taught, if you take these steps and you do these things and you have the accolade, you climb the ladder, that you'll get to exactly where you want to be. And you arguably, on paper, to some people, Wall Street, so many people aspire to that. And you still, for you, knew there was something deeper. And you actually lived through all of that experience and tragedy and trauma and like beautiful moments too. And you decided for yourself, actually, that's not it. That's not what's fulfilling to me. That's not what. So you have that experience of the reality of what we're taught we should want, and then still wanting to seek and learn and understand in a different way, in a different perspective.
And I like to do it practically. I heard recently, and I often say I couldn't have an eat, pray, love moment because of my responsibilities, right? And we all create this lifestyle. You living in New York and having that lifestyle. I was there too, living in San Francisco, buying a house. Like, you have these things that we build ourselves up to, and it's all great, but then you have to practically stay in your life. And so those little moments or breadcrumbs help me find a way to be less reactive. And I let myself explore. Sometimes I think we're like, if I do a cold plunge, I will feel better. And you might. But some people, like, I don't love the cold plunge. Okay, so then you keep trying and trying and trying. There is no one answer. And I've created these little wellness cocktails, so to speak, or mocktails that you can, at certain times, I know I need certain things. So also just knowing what would work. Like, maybe I do need breath work and I need to stomp on the floor and have a somatic release. Or maybe I need to meditate. And we were just talking before we hit record about going away by myself with my journal and taking a long walk on a cold beach.
And I think there's so much validity, and we're in Aries season right now. So about that attunement to self and really understanding what you need. But I would assume that being the competent corporate woman and being a mother and a wife and a daughter and taking care, all these things you had going on at that time in your life, exploration and tapping into these things that maybe aren't considered normal, Reiki and spiritual healing. How did you even, obviously there were breadcrumbs along the way, and then your boss being murdered and that whole catalyst really seem to have put you on that path. But how do you even begin to make the time? I hear that from a lot of people. I don't have the time. I don't have the energy. I have too much responsibility. How did you even start? Like, where did you choose to begin?
I don't know if I would recommend it, but I use my time wisely. There are pockets of time that I use that other people might not. So airports, a lot of books, a lot of podcasts. I would time block. I would fly cross country a lot. So I'd be like, for the first hour, I'm going to work, and then I can read my book. And I always created space for myself in some way, shape, or form. I found a lot through yoga mentors who would open and close. The arc of a yoga class is so beautiful. It sort of taught me to come into Shavasana and have a moment of thought for myself. And I would say no. I would say no. And I'm still pretty good at that. My husband would and kids would agree. But sometimes I'm like, we just can't. We just can't. And that allows me to take the bike ride. That allows me to, even when we go on family vacation, I'm like, hey, this morning's for me. And maybe that morning is a massage, or maybe it's just paddleboarding by myself. And I have been unapologetic about that, even if it's 20 minutes, even if it's 20 minutes.
Were you always that way in your life? Do you think that unapologetic doing what you needed to do for you? Because some people are, right? And some people we have to learn.
No, I think I had to learn. I would get so sick, Katie. I would go and go and go and go, travel, do all the mergers, do all the integrations, emailing at all hours, working 2 coasts. So you're working 5 a.m. West, you're working till all hours. And I missed people's weddings. I missed birthdays. I missed a school play when my daughter was in preschool. You don't miss those. And I missed it. And I think I woke up a couple of times, one at my mom's diagnosis and the second time after my second daughter going to Sue's funeral. And I just said, I need to know what's going on with me so I don't get sick. I really believe a lot of my mom's cancer, I don't know if she would admit this, but was trauma. And I think she imbibed that stress. I'm not saying a lot of it's not environmental, but I do think that's part of it. And I wanted to feel good. I do think the West Coast and following West Coast trends, I really think that they influenced my Eastern appetite, my appetite for acupuncture and different things long ago.
And I think it's very human of us to think that we could make different choices that would help us avoid pain and suffering, arguably, right? And I'm also of the mindset that not every painful moment needs to be turned into a lesson. Like sometimes things are just hard and suck and were not meant to happen. But using your mom's diagnosis, that's how I really started my own journey with, my dad as well. And then losing your boss. Did you recognize those moments as kind of like a fork in the road? Because I think you have 2 choices. You can go harder in the direction you're going and continue to turn away and not pay attention, which in the moment seems like the easier choice, but ends up being the harder. And then understanding, what do you think about you recognize those moments as being moments for change and opportunity? Because not everyone would see it that way.
Well, in both cases, my life came to a screeching halt. My mom's for 20 days when she was in the ICU and I left work and my boss was great about it. I worked, quote unquote, from the hospital room, but she really protected my space. And then I think having small kids and that tragedy happening, it felt like a before and after moment. I can still put myself in the chair at the funeral where I did not want to be around any of those people anymore. They were so distant from what had happened, and the behaviors, a lot of men were there, and the behaviors were disassociated, really. And I then have always been a reader, and I just started following, for better or worse, the self-help world. And I think I just was learning what is out there. So I do think that my brain really went into, this is not normal, and I don't want to act the way some people are acting in a time of grief, ignoring it. I wanted to process it. I thought we were all owed time to process her passing in such a tragic way. And then it took me 5 years to leave, 6 years to leave. So it was a slow road. I think the leap is a little bit of a fallacy. The internet, most people have a long road to making a big decision that impacts your whole life.
Yeah, I think it is a fallacy, and that it seems so shiny and attractive to just quit your job and do the thing you want to do. And it's kind of like, this idea of an overnight success that actually takes 10 years in the making to make the choice. And I do think in this new age of everyone wanting to be an entrepreneur, which I love, I think is great. People are seeking that autonomy. If you don't burn your life down, that means you're not doing it in like a respectable way. And that's just not reality when you have all these responsibilities and other people depending on you. And like, you still have to work and provide and mother and show up.
That's the part I don't necessarily recommend, is that I was doing career coaching before I combined everything into the energy and people changing their lives. One time I left my laptop out overnight and it rained. So I was burning it at all the ends. I was coaching on the weekend. I was doing energy healing outside. And then I was filming, courses. I lost my laptop. My husband's like, okay, something has to give. And I was like, okay, I think I'm ready to leave now. You get to the point where what's working, what's not. So, morning, noon, and night. And I do joke, he gets mad when I tell this story, but at one point I was working so much on the side hustle that he was like, are you having an affair? Because I was just like so into it. And so you do get to this point where you become obsessed. But I do think my clairvoyance popped up a couple of times now that I look back. Like when my grandmother passed, I had a real moment while I was hiking that I feel like I connected to her passing. So I think that there were these inklings early on, but I didn't know what the hell to do with them.
I think most people have. The intuition runs so deep, especially with women. And within the vein of what you shared, what you're screaming about, like unapologetically asking for help, like also unapologetically listening to our intuition. And we're made to believe that it's in our head or it's our anxiety and da-da-da. And I had a recent experience where something happened and it was about to happen again. And my friend was like, I'm just so nervous because you were right the first time. I was like, yeah, I was. And I was right again. And not in the way I wanted to be right.
Right.
It wasn't in the way I wanted to be. And it's such a fine line nowadays between like our negativity bias and creating the reality. It's so hard sometimes in this world to figure out what's our intuition and what we've been conditioned to tap into. But I'd love to hear a little bit about how you even started to work with your intuition in that way, as someone who came from such a structure, more traditionally structure, order, corporate background, to start to defy that way of operating and really listen to your intuition. I know you said yoga was a big part of that, but where did like the Reiki come in and the intuitive sort of work that you do now?
I think yoga opened me up to things like chanting and humming and these vibrations. That was my first tidbit. And when I left San Francisco, where there were drumming circles, and people didn't call it sound bath back then. It was just like we were going to have these moments. And then I moved to New York, and there would be people at the end in Shavasana who were Broadway singers who would sing. And so you could feel the change in the room. That was like the first inkling. And then in COVID, I was on a bike ride. I'd been career coaching for many years. And I would just say things to people like, is there a woman in your group? I would get these pings, as a lot of times people call them. And it would be like, is there a woman in your group who's trying to destroy your career? And people would be like, yes, her name is Sally. And I'd be like, I don't know where that came from. So I was on a bike ride in COVID, and I was supposed to be listening to a conference call. And I was listening to an audio book, and it said, if you have interest in anything I've talked about, sign up. And so I signed up for who was then my Reiki master, Kelsey Patel, and I just kept going. So I did it under the vein of learning more without the expectation of what I was going to do with it. And then in those Reiki attunements, which for those who don't know, it's essentially an opening of your intuition, opening of my third eye in particular. In that first attunement, I heard a woman speaking to me in tongues, which I've never talked about on a podcast before. I had a clear vision of her. A day later, after the attunement, I then saw a picture of her on Instagram, which I've never seen again. It was like that same illustration. I was like, what in God's green earth is happening? My husband's also in finance. He's like, Who are you? What just happened? And then my intuition just kept getting stronger. And you know what, Katie? I did it for myself. I did all of that for myself. I did not necessarily do it with the assumption I would ever have coaching sessions with energy or work that in. I really didn't. So maybe that's it. It's like sometimes you just have to have fun for yourself or do something that interests you. It could be knitting. I don't know. I don't want to knit. I'm not a particularly good cook anymore, but like, your thing. Like if it's gardening, maybe you'll get your intuitive pings while you're gardening. It's like you sort of have to find what lights you up. And then like I kept going. I'm studying IFS, internal family systems, and I use that in my coaching now. I wrote an oracle deck, which is in the mail to you now. So the 24 oracle deck came at one of my nights away, and it just popped literally into my brain where I was at the bar eating dinner and I couldn't stop writing. It was that divine moment. And I just felt so held by the universal energy. I do use the word God now. I didn't for a long time, but I felt very held by God.
I think really what I'm receiving from all this is, you just have to be willing to try. And I think we come to a point in our lives where we think we've made the choices. We don't need to make any more choice. And I feel that way often too. I'm like, no more decisions, no more choices, no more decisions. I'm done. I've done enough. I've had enough. But we're made to believe that we'll reach this age, right? Especially women, and like that, that's it. No more choices for yourself. Your life is for other people, and that you can't follow your curiosity. That we get too old to follow our curiosity, and that we can't try new things. And you arguably had, like I said, a career a lot of people would want and be like, that's enough. And you kept just following the pings, as we call it in like the wellness space. And I also, this is maybe a controversial opinion, but if a little kid came up to me and was like, I want to be a Reiki practitioner, I'd be like, what the hell? Like, what? I never thought I was going to do this ever.
Right.
I couldn't, this was not even in the sphere of my, not possible.
Same.
And I often think it's one of these things that is it calls to you, and you seek it out because you need it. And then you offer it to other people because of what it's done for you, not because I think I'm going to rake in the millions, like being a breathwork practitioner and a somatic guide. It's because what it's done for me and what it did for you.
Right.
And I'm weary of anyone who is, who knows what their her past life is like, but they're 18 years old and like, I want to be a Reiki. I'm like, okay. We'll see, live some life. But it is one of the true callings in that way, like being a teacher of any sort, or being something that is just not popular and by societal standards going to like make us all the money. And I do find the more you opened yourself up to that and were willing, the more it came to you and like sought you out with your oracle deck and the way you now with IFS and all the things. I just think your curiosity and willingness is really inspiring, because so many people would have just been like, I'm done now. I've had enough.
Right. I was hired to do some yoga and Reiki and a workshop about 2 years ago now. And we were up in the Catskills, and this woman whose name I will not name, but she's an influencer. She does make millions with a lot of brand sponsors. She's comedian-esque. And she said, when I was in corporate, we had a team astrologer, we had a coach, we had a therapist. And she said, I named my children based on what the astrologer told me. At the time they were born, I had a couple names and she helped me pick. And she said, I would never tell anyone that out loud but you. And you don't have to tell anyone, but I think you should use the tools that light you up. But also I'm not ashamed. I talk about all sorts of things. And I believe that in all religions, in all societies, there have been oracles. There have been people to help. There have been the medicine people and the Reiki masters, hands-on healing, hands-off healing, whatever you want to call them, that have helped over the centuries, the decades. And I want modern society to not wear busyness as a badge. And if you do, also to have a support system. Like maybe you are I work with a lot of breadwinning women who need to chill out and find themselves again. who can't leave the ladder or the pathway for many reasons, and they wouldn't be able to leave for many years. So it's like, maybe you do in the background have an astrologer on call. Maybe you do have a library of books that you reference to get through your work week. It doesn't have to be all or nothing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there is no one way to do it or experience it all. And I think, especially for women, and I'm sure the women you'd work with, I'd love to hear a little bit more about what those sessions look like if you're comfortable sharing. I'm sure it's personal to each and every one, but I think especially women now more than ever, because we've been doing the work and society hasn't necessarily caught up yet, maybe, right? But see more of a discourse or disconnection of like where we are and where we want to be, and like society catching up with us. So, and arguably, you know, I think I went through my own period of like, how is all my acting training going to help me as a practitioner? And it's my capacity for emotional life that has totally informed what I do now. So also, how do you work with women who are really stuck in where they are versus where they want to be, and helping them see, just like you did, all the skills, like that time was not wasted. It's something that you can use 100%. Moving forward.
If we work together in a longer capacity, so usually 3 months, and they're super stuck, usually type A, successful, often eldest daughter or eldest girl, sort of my usual.
So me.
Yeah. And it's like you're stuck, maybe, you know, in some ways, maybe you're also financially at the point where you're making maybe the most you've ever made. There are all these, I would say, archetypes, but there's fear of claiming what you want. There's also usually a male component or male energy around, so that the industries, big pharma, hospital system, financial services, insurance, go on, right? And sometimes even in the wellness space, there can be these male archetypes that people can't feel like they can use their intuition in a meeting or on a deal. So here's what we do. We really go big picture first. What are we trying to do? Vision, values, big picture, dream it up. And then the next session, we go deep dive. We drill all the way down. And that second session is usually an energy clearing. And then from there, we use my clarity map, which is basically my process. So from that big picture, we talk about having an intern mind. We talk about growth mindset. And then we break things down into small steps. Some of that is emotional. So what do I need to articulate to the people around me about what I want to do for work? A lot of my clients don't leave right away. They often leave after they work with me, sometimes a year later, sometimes more, but they often carve out really beautiful roles for themselves, even in investment banking, even in a startup. And they create space for themselves to work at what makes sense for them. And then they start to maybe pull back, because the men often are going golfing on a Friday with clients, in air quotes, and they're feeling guilty about trying to get to a parent-teacher conference or a soccer game. So we talk about boundaries a lot. And then if people work with me one-on-one, I do a lot of energy healing virtually, which sounds crazy, but I go into a complete trance. So I actually like it better. I'm not distracted by a twitch of a toe. I work with people all over the world, and I dive right in. I have a process to connect into energy, always do some sort of card pull. And then I talk about guides that are there. Sometimes people that have passed, I do not call myself a medium, but I am clairaudient. So I get very clear words, messages. Last week, I got a bench at the end of the session. We're closing, and I'm like, what was that bench? And she said, oh, my father passed, and we have a bench outside of his pub. And, you know, it was just beautiful. Beautiful. So I'm very blessed to have these intuitive powers that help.
Yeah, that's so amazing. And the way you marry the work that you used to do, like your career coaching, with helping women get clarity on where they want to go, whether it's career or personal life or otherwise. And I think it can feel easy, especially now, to feel so lost and lacking purpose. And that there's only, again, we, at least in this country, United States, like, we get so bogged down with just like one way, the right way to do things and the right way to experience, and this oversaturation of practitioners and people. And, we're always telling ourselves why it's not possible, instead of just getting curious about what is piquing our interest and not worried about the result and following like the path of what's giving us the most bliss or joy.
Yeah, I have done retreats. I did a lot of huge conferences that I would manage the programming of in corporate, standing on stages. So I did retreats right out of the gate. And I'm like, I just love going one-on-one. That's my jam right now. I want to go deep. I want to help people. And I want to know how to move past those, maybe what they feel are battle wounds. And I am so much less reactive now. If like, the proof is in the pudding. You can go from someone who would go off like a rocket at anyone in her path to, yes, I still honk my horn. Okay. I'm always going to be a horn honker. But I had a family situation a week and a half ago now, and it's very complicated. I don't want to share the details because of it's too complicated, but I processed for 3 days in my own way. And then I've moved. I am not dwelling. And I took a moment actually recently. I was like, I'm really actually proud of myself. Because old me would have called those people who made the situation more complicated and gone off on them. And, it's not about that anymore. One piece of it, though, is women, talking about screaming, I might have a second one, is that women need to get closer to their money. I think the benefit of me working in Wall Street is all I talked about was wealth accumulation, retirement, wealth pull downs, post-retirement in my job. That's what I did. And business succession, career succession, all of that was a constant. And then sometimes women come to me and say, I want to leave. I have no idea. Or how much is it to do a startup? Or should I do a 503B? Now, sometimes I have to go to other experts, but I do work with women at the end of that coaching container to say, like, well, what do you know what you need to do to leave? Do you know what your retirement package is? Do you know what your health benefits are? Do you know what's possible? And I'm okay to have that. And women should not apologize for asking those questions of their employers, their advisors, their vanguards, their tax accountants, their spouses, their partners, their families. Like, we need to know. Because I think that's part of the stress. And when I sat with my girlfriends recently on a girls' weekend, a lot of them are the breadwinners. And they're like, I'm not sure where we're going to retire or what I can afford. I'm like, ladies, get closer to your money.
Yeah, I think money has been used to control women for so long. Like, women couldn't even have their own bank account in this country till 1973 or something like that. So
it's not that long ago.
No, not
right around when I was born. I'm turning 50 later this year, which is nuts to think about. I don't feel 50, but it's horrible. Own land without another male on the ticket. It's credit cards.
It's so crazy because we can even see it in our family systems. My grandmother never had a job, never had a bank account, never. And arguably, my grandparents raised me in a lot of ways, and the dynamics were not, my grandfather was the boss. But when it came to she doesn't know. He has since passed, and everyone has to manage her money for her now. And she's never had to pay a bill. She never had to do any of that, which, again, in some relationships that works. But unfortunately, for the majority of society, it was used to control women. And so, I went to all girls Catholic high school, and it was very progressive in many ways. But I'm like, why am I learning how to type? Why am I not learning how to, like, I know how to type. I learned how to do that in grammar school. Why am I'm not, like, there's nothing wrong with being a secretary, but this isn't 1955. You're not preparing me to be a stenographer. Arguably, you're preparing me to be a business. That's what they kept. they hadn't like changed the curriculum to match what they were instilling in us. And I don't know how to do my fucking taxes. I don't know. You asked me to do my taxes. I always say I was in AP English and like remedial math. I don't know what's going on.
And oh my God.
And you ended up in finance, which is great, which actually women need to be more.
You don't need calculus to be in finance. You don't.
Well, I wish somebody would have told me that.
Not the finance I was in.
I wish someone would have told me that. But I do think it's something I've been the last few years really, it's wildly uncomfortable for me, but I've been forcing myself to educate myself on more, and I hesitate on it in a big way. And astrologically, I also see in my chart why I do the way certain things are positioned, but it's something that I know. I'm a single woman. I don't know if I'm going to get married. I don't know if I'm going to have these things. So arguably, I need to be the one responsible for what's happening in my financial life. And I was constantly raised in a system and a family structure where that was not discussed. So I understand why I'm hesitant, but it's like, it's just not working for me anymore. The lack of being the leader. If I want to be the leader of my own life, I also have to be the leader of my financial life.
Financial wellness, financial health. And I have an abundance archetype quiz, and there is an avoider in one of the archetypes, and that's okay and that's normal. But then we have to shift a little bit into what is working, what can lift us up, what makes sense for us right now. And then that actually helps you make decisions.
Mm-hmm.
So overall, I'm curious. Now, I'm asking you a question about the fire horse, but a lot of women came to me this year in January and they're like, "It's fire horse. What's happening? Should I be going? Should I be quitting? Should I be?" And I'm like, maybe you're not astrologically ready to be moving at a rate of speed that you're turning on a dime. So for people in my life that are listening, like, how do you explain the astrology of the fire horse and know that sometimes you have to still trot? Like, we don't all have to be jumping over these huge, equestrian jumps here, ladies.
I love that question. And that's Chinese astrology. I'm less familiar, but my understanding is the same. Like, we take these astrological happenings and we want to distill it all down to like your clients that are coming to you, like, I have to get the pressure that we create, the pressure cooker. And it makes me want to share astrology even more, because we've taken this thing, right? Like, even the idea of marriage, like, we've taken this thing that this is how you do it. And and that's just not true. Like, you have to A plus B plus C. Yep. And that's not, it's the same thing with any dealing with real people. That doesn't work. Your formula doesn't necessarily work for me. Now, I have a lot of fire in my birth chart. So it's Aries season right now. So after a few months of feeling awful, I'm feeling like I'm ready to go again, because I'm also an Aries Mars, and how I take action and how I work and my desire is ruled by Aries. I know that. So I know, and some people are like, it's placebo. Whatever. I know that this season is going to inspire me to get going again, right? The same way I know Taurus season is in my 12th house of my subconscious. It's going to bring up something in me. So sure, fire horse is the invitation, right? Like, to get going, but maybe you're a rabbit. Maybe you're a snake. Maybe you're if you want to use the Chinese astrology analogy, for me, it would be knowing where things are in your birth chart and knowing what you are, learning about you so you can understand the world around you. And you can understand your interactions with that's why I learned astrology, to understand myself, but really to understand the people in my life better and be less at odds with everyone,
right.
I know. And it's the same thing with the fire. Like, I happen to be fire.
You and me both.
I happen to be a horse. I'm a Sag. Like, I happen to be
Sag. Same.
So I'm into it. But I also know, like, my astrology, my numerology, like, I'm pulling my human design. I'm pulling from all these things through my own lens. And it's kind of like you said, exploring all the things to help you understand yourself better. And then instead of, it's like these fad diets, right? Like everyone did paleo, everyone did keto. It doesn't work the same way for everyone.
Right.
And
Oh my gosh, this
yeah.
weightlifting thing, I can't. I have had 2 abdominal surgeries, and if I lift a weight, I'm going to be back on an operating table. And this jam protein down, like I'm just going to be chill. I'm just chill about the food, people. I'm not.
I know. I saw a meme that was like, they're putting protein in the water. We've lost the plot. I'm like, right now. But I think it comes back to this idea of not wanting to be the leader of your own life, because in order to take responsibility for yourself, that also involves like, okay, I'm an Aries Mars. Let's use Aries for this in general. That means I'm going to be a little hot-headed and fiery. And when you tell me something, I'm going to be like, well, you told me on purpose because you want me to act on it. Is that my best trait? No. Sometimes it is, sometimes it isn't. And I have to take responsibility for that. And I think the more we learn about ourselves, maybe this is how you felt when you started your healing journey. It's like some days I say I just want to be ignorant again, because the more I learn and understand myself, the more I'm responsible for the way I show up and how I behave.
Yeah, that's true. Ignorance was bliss.
It was. It is. It can, sometimes I'm like, oh, take me back. But so we latch onto these general ideas without understanding how they influence us. And if one of your clients was a rabbit, I'm like, I don't know that the year of the horse is or a tortoise, or like, I don't know that.
A rat. I have to look at it now. But I think you're right. Like, I think it's us in relation to these bigger pictures, us in relation to astrology, us in relation to peptides, us in relation to a sauna or breath work. You have to find peace in your ritual. So for me, and they can shift. So for me, it was an oracle card every day in COVID, every single day. I was losing my marbles of fear and anxiety, and it grounded me. I used to hide them in my journals. I used to put them under my pillow. I'd pull a card, be like, okay, anchor. Okay, whatever the thing was, energy. That's what I needed then. Now I'm like a new moon kind of oracle girl. Mm-hmm. So it can shift. I do think that we think, like you said, it's black and white. That's why I have the and. That's why my Substack is living in the and. It can be 2 things. Like, I tried this and now I'm doing something else. Or I like this a little bit. I'm going to do this. And also I'm going to keep doing yoga. So I don't need to be at the protein factory and doing heavy weights, because that doesn't work. Am I a little bit more aware of some of those things now? Sure. But doing your own research, having that inquisitive mind, asking questions is the way that I think you and I are operating. And then we take it in. Does this make sense for me right now? I stopped looking 5 years out. I don't know about you, but I'm like, how about 1 year out? How about 6 months out? How about first half of the year? What are we trying to do? Because I got overwhelmed, decision fatigue, trying to be the mastermind Wizard of Oz of everyone around me. I'm like, how about 6 months? What are we doing?
No, I completely agree. And I think that works for some. Again, it's the willingness to explore and understand yourself so deeply that you can know what works and what doesn't work for you. Like, I'm not a specific manifester. Like, I know what I want, but then I just take steps that I think will get me close to the thing. And they always do, Right. And I think it's very traditionally masculine to be in this like constant, and that works. I see that works for men, right? Like, that really works for them, or they think it does. I don't know. But it doesn't work for me. Like, I think people are always surprised that I do what I do, and then I love a dirty martini. Like, I both can exist. I don't, my family makes fun of me. My one brother in particular, he's like, well, you're vegan. I was like, I've never been vegan. I have eaten meat every day of my life. I actually am very protein heavy. Like, animal meat. Like, what he's joking, but part of him is serious. And I think we live in this, especially women, we can't have both, or we can't have it all. And maybe you can't have it all exactly at the same time, but if you're just willing to, like you said, unapologetically prioritize yourself, ask for help, move from the space of what you need, even if it's 20 minutes on the family vacation, that's how you get closer and closer to figuring out what is for you and what works for you and what doesn't. Instead of this, we have to fall in line with, what we've been told works for us.
Right. No, I had a conversation with a client who was saying she decided to stay home for the weekend. And the husband and the kids, they did their sports thing. And then one of her neighbors was like, hey, I'm going to go watch the champion soccer game for the 8-year-olds. And she had so much guilt that she still stayed home and didn't get in the car with that woman. I'm like, if you want to clean out your closet, that's your weekend. Like, you should feel zero guilt. And I've asked a lot of men, and they don't feel the same guilt having the fun, separating themselves. I'm a spicy marg girl, so I can't do the dirty martinis. But
I'm also a spicy marg girl. I grew up in a bar, but
right? So it's like, I do think we can do both. I think we can have the sound journey and also have a moment where we're letting loose and being fun and being ourselves.
And being arguably, like, selfish is not a bad word, or self-centered. Like, if you're not going to center yourself, who is? And it's the way we've been conditioned to think that these feelings or these experiences, like feeling like we're owed something or we're deserving of something, is, for some reason, women have been conditioned for many. I know why, but we don't have to get into that now. We're not deserving of that time and that space, and that we need to. I don't even have a husband. I don't have a partner. I don't have kids, and I still feel the guilt in saying no to people.
Right.
And so often it's easy for me to see my girlfriends who have husbands and have kids, and their husbands unapologetically go on these trips all the time, and I'm preaching to them. But then when it comes to me, I'm like,
right.
Oh, I have to say yes, or I have to do this, or I have to be quiet or not express. That's a big one for me. I'm so expressive in my life, in my friendships, in my family, in my work, and then in romantic partnerships, I closed, and I don't ask for what I need, and I know why I do it, and now it's just like breaking the pattern, but it's so easy for me to see it in other people, and then when it comes time for me to do it myself, it's challenging.
So tricky. So tricky. Do as I say, not as I do sometimes, right? I mean, we all have lessons. That's why we all keep ourselves on track. I know. It can be tricky. And maybe right now that's, where you are. Mm-hmm. But sometimes that can change and shift too. Other people can bring certain things out of you.
And I'd love to hear a little bit about, especially because you're a mother, and I think sometimes I see some of my friends who have bought into this idea that, like, now that's it. Like, that's what they have to be fully focused on. And I do think, in the earlier years, that's probably really, all consuming and true. But I see so many of them make concessions for what they want. And that they feel like maybe that has to just be completely on the back burner now, or it's an unrealized dream that they can't tap into. What would you say to them, or how would you recommend that they just come back into contact with that part of themselves, or explore the other side of it?
I mean, every phase of motherhood is different, and there are good and bad stages and ages. So it's not going to change. Like, yes, the beginning is a heavy load, but then the teen years, which I'm in, is like also a whole other load, helping them make the right decisions, helping them navigate friendships and relationships. So if not now, when? And are you going to regret not doing something? I don't love to live in regret, but it's like, if you have the gumption, if you have the drive, if you have an idea, you don't have to do it 100%. So I'll give an example, is that I thought, as I was leaving Bank of America Merrill Lynch, I was like, I'm writing a book. I'm writing a book. I'm writing a book. I'm writing a book. I went to a writing class. I kept saying it. I'm writing a book. People ask me, how's the book? Well, guess what? I don't want to write a book. And I decided that about 2 years into writing the book. I don't want to go on book tour. I have no desire to market a book because I see what the people in my writing circles are doing. But talk to me in 6 years when everyone's out of the house. So you can still, so instead, what am I doing? Journaling. I'm writing on Substack, right? I'm still writing. I'm just not pushing this massive boulder, which writing a memoir right now is very, very difficult space. If you have this huge thing, like maybe someone wants to do skincare or they want to go back to work, maybe it's just consulting or joining a volunteer board, or instead of just volunteering for story hour at your kids' XYZ, volunteer for something that aligns to you so that when you are ready to do the thing, you're like, oh, I am aware of X, Y, and Z because I'm still very involved. So I think it's not about giving up these big ideas. It's about finding ways to make it work. I do think women often it's very hard, but I have stopped volunteering as much because it wasn't lighting me up and it wasn't serving what I needed. The kids are taken care of. So what do I need to do for myself?
I love that. And you shared a little bit in the beginning of what you were screaming about for women, but like, is there any one piece of advice you have for a woman maybe who feels really stuck right now, where a young woman, maybe in her, doing well in her career, whatever age, because women can be doing well at any age, but maybe feeling stuck in her career, not fully aligned with her purpose, but just really in the stuckness of how do I get out of this? What would you say to her?
I would suggest finding out first, 2 steps. First one is doing a body scan. And I mean an energetic body scan. Where from your crown to your tips of your big toes, where is this sitting in your body? Usually stress sort of sits heart, back of the head. And then you can call me, DM me, I'm serious. I will respond. You can email me. I will help you figure that out. Or someone like Katie or Google will even help you figure out, what does that mean energetically? That's the first part. The body keeps score. We know that it tells a story. And then the second piece is to really, and we've used this word a lot today, unapologetically write down what the hell you want. So for me, 2 years ago, it would have been, I want to write a book. Or I want to get away from my boss. Maybe you still love your industry. Or I want to find a romantic partner that meets me where I am. Claim it. Claim it. You don't have to tell anyone. Claim what you want. Because I know you already know the answer. If you are stuck, you know the answer. And for some people, it's like, I want to stay where I am. I just want to get the hell away from this toxic work person. All right, we can work through that together. Or you can work through that. You can navigate that. But until you claim it, and it might feel selfish or narcissistic, no one needs to see that piece of paper. And I don't mean think it. The second step is to physically write it down, because that is an energetic release. And I have the clarity map. It's digital. People can use those steps. I'm happy to offer, if people email me, I will send your listeners a copy for free. It has all the little instructions on there. And that's just like, sometimes you need a little cheat sheet to get unstuck.
That's so generous. And I think sometimes saying the thing out loud is the hardest part of, like, especially for women. We're taught to, especially of a certain generation, we're taught not to want. And saying the thing out loud and admitting what we want can be so scary, even scarier than the actions that you take after the admitting of the wanting. Just saying, like, actually, this is what I want. And claiming it, like you said, the claiming of the unapologetic desire, want, goal, wish, and moving from that space.
And knowing that you're enough right now sounds also so cheesy, but the other day I was beating myself up for having a lot of chores not done, not responding to emails, and hadn't even showered. Like, what is wrong with me? I know how to do all these things. And you know what? I needed a day. And if I'd been in corporate, I would have taken a personal day or a sick day. So I just climbed in bed. I had a book for a couple hours. I ate some soup and I watched some trash TV. I'm a spiritual healer and I like to Love Is Blind. Like, you can do both things.
Dave.
And And then I got back to it. And it's sometimes like, this is what I can give today. And if you look back at the 7 days prior, you're like, you know what, Lynn, you do need a break. So you probably give your kids a break, or your spouse or your best friend, like, oh, I know she's so busy, or your parents, but like, how about us? I find that the word gratitude is very, very, very tricky for me. So instead it's thank you. Thank you, Katie, for having me on. It sort of has this ricochet, and it's very purposeful. And then sometimes I thank myself, like, thank you for taking the day off, or thank you for booking that acupuncture, or thank you for reading that book. And I thank myself for taking care of myself. Because if you've also ever had a physical ailment like I have, you sort of need to do that. You need to be like, all right, we're here. We're doing the thing.
Yeah. Sometimes the biggest step is not like the big step. It's the small ones that you're willing to, even just the thank you, or the taking the day off, or booking the appointment. That can be just as powerful as those big steps.
We need to have a little bit more fun. We need to have a little bit more curiosity. I think that brings the fun.
For sure.
And yeah, I think the joy. A lot of people find joy, and somehow women, we put ourselves last. And I have been called names for not putting myself last, and I don't care. I'm happier for it.
I think if you're a woman getting called a name, you're probably doing something right. And I would say, you know what? Actually, I would say to your clients asking about the year of the fire horse, if there was ever a year for fun, this is the year.
Ooh,
so you could tell them that
I like
too.
that tidbit. I'm going to put that at the top. The year of fun.
Yes, definitely the year of fun. But I'm so glad we got to have this conversation, Lynn. Thank you for all your time, your wisdom, your energy. I'll have all your information in the show notes for the Oracle deck, anyone that wants to work with Lynn one-on-one. But thank you so much for sharing with us and being here.
Thank you. And I can't wait to hear how you use the deck, maybe in a class or with a client yourself, or your own practice. So we'll stay in touch. This is wonderful. Thank you.
Of course, I can't wait. Thank you. Thank you so much for tuning into this episode with Lynn. Thank you, Lynn, for joining me for this conversation. Like I shared in our conversation, there's so much I admire about you and the way you move through the world, and all the wisdom you shared with us and me in this episode. I'm so grateful for. If you want to work with Lynn, all of her information is in the show notes, as well as the 24 Oracle deck. I can't wait to get it in the mail and start working with it. If you have any questions for Lynn, again, like she shared, please reach out to her directly. She makes herself super accessible, and all of her content, her Substack, everything she puts out in the world, I am taking in, and I hope you will too. Thank you again, and I can't wait to breathe in and scream out with you next time.